Okay, this is a continuation of market failure. The first part we looked at the different types of market failure. Now we're going to look at how those market failures can be solved. Just a recap of the previous lesson. What are the different types? Well, public goods, asymmetric information, externalities, and market power. So let's have a look how ways in which they can be solved. So the first one is public goods, high demand goods that producers are not willing to supply, and the main characteristic really of public goods is non-excludability. Everyone can have a bit of a play whether they pay for them or not. What's the solution? Well, generally it's provided by governments, but you can have sponsorship as well. Parks, streetlights, roads provided by governments, but you have things like fireworks at New Year can be provided by a state government, but they may also be provided by a local company that's going to sponsor things like that. And they can't really say, okay, you're not part of our company, don't look up, everyone look at your feet. So it's non-excludability. Okay, asymmetric information where one party knows more than another party. Solution? Well, one solution is government regulations on, notably, say, insider trading. The link I have there is a link to an article regarding Rene Rivkin and the troubles that he had before he died when he was convicted of insider trading. So that's one way. Another way is, say, you're going to buy a car. Well, the guy selling you the car, he knows more about the car than you. He knows whether he's revved the engine out, he knows whether it's been in an accident, things like that. So how can you solve that? Well, you can bring in professional organisations, you can bring up the RACV and get them to come out and have a look at it, and they will give you a report. You'll pay for it, but they will give you a report because they're experts. So that's one way of addressing asymmetric information. Market power, where one or a few businesses control the market. Again, what's the solution? Well, we'll go back to the good old-fashioned regulations. ACCC is how the government uses, or is a vehicle the government uses to control market power. And as we've discussed many times, the VCE and Amcor, and that's a link to the VCE and Amcor court case and the fines that they had. That they were fined a total of about 95 million for getting together and price fixing. Okay, and they got away with it because they had market power. Well, they didn't get away with it, but they thought they could because they had market power. So again, regulations. Righto, externalities. So this is going to be a long one. So the unforeseen social cost or benefits of production. I'm going to come back to that point in a second, benefits, okay? So far, really what we've looked at when we looked at externalities is negative, but we're going to come back to that benefits. So what's the solution? Well, we can introduce a tax to producers. The idea of a tax will be it'll increase the cost of production. Therefore, if it's the cost of production, what are they more likely to do? They're going to increase their price. If the price to the consumer goes up, demand generally drops. If demand generally drops, well, producers have now got to sit down. They've got to either find cheaper alternative means themselves or consumers as well. Because the price of one thing has gone up, they're going to look for a cheaper alternative means. Okay, so what are we moving into here? Well, we're moving into the carbon tax. The big one that's been on everyone's lips for the last 12 months. The carbon tax. On the 1st of July 2012, the federal government introduced a price on carbon. Note that nowhere in the government's promotional material do they use the term carbon tax. It is a price on carbon or it's an emissions trading scheme. They were very, very careful not to use the word carbon tax, but we all know that's what it is. Okay, the current cost is $23 per tonne. Eventually it will become an emissions trading scheme whereby the idea is that the market will set the price. Similar systems to what they're running in Europe. Okay, those that are for, it's a benefit to society through less pollution. It forces businesses to try and reduce their carbon, therefore they pay less tax, and can change the way we use resources. Those against, it's a higher cost to consumers. We're not going to argue the pros and cons here, we're just going to look at the carbon tax as is. Okay, so how does it work? It changes the behaviour of all market participants, and that's the whole point that it's aimed at. So let's look at our supply and demand graph here. Coal and solar power. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they're exactly the same. Okay, both can produce a P1, both can produce quantity 1. Okay, for the exact same price. Everything is exactly the same, coal and solar power. So, both can produce a P1 supply Q. Okay, so the government introduces a carbon tax on coal power. What we have is, we have our basic graph here. So what is the effect of the carbon tax? Well, as we said previously, there's an increased cost to production. If you're a producer and you have an increased cost of production, you're probably going to restrict your supply a bit more. So that's going to happen to our supply curve? Our supply curve is going to move to the left. Okay, we're going to have less supply. The new supply curve, S1 you want, but is also S plus the amount of the tax. Okay, so the price is now going to go up because we've got a tax imposed on our coal, haven't we? Which means our equilibrium price is now also going to increase, and our quantity is going to reduce. Okay, because price goes up, therefore quantity demanded is going to reduce. This is, we know that, you know, price go up, demand go down. So that's, I mean, this is basic year 11 supply and demand. Well, remember guys, everything comes back to supply and demand. And don't forget, it's this little bit right in here. Okay, this is the amount of the tax. So you can label this one S and this one S1 if you want, but I think just in these early stages it's a lot easier to go S here and S plus the tax, so you know. So when you get asked in an exam, where is the tax? It's here. Okay, so we can see now, because of the effect of the tax, price has gone up, demand is going to drop. Cost rise, shifting the supply curve to the left. We all know that. As the cost of production increases, supply curve shifts to the left. This increases the equilibrium price for coal. Price of coal increases, consumer demand will decrease. Price of solar power has not changed. Therefore, consumers may decide, or is expected that consumers will decide to move to solar power. So here's an important point, very important point. Okay, we keep drumming into your relative price. So what we can say is the carbon tax changes the relative price of coal power in comparison to solar power. Okay, we've got to really drum this relative prices into you. It's a big thing in previous exams, and it's a big thing in the study design. Okay, so important. There can be positive externalities. Remember, an externality is a cost or benefit of production. For example, medicines. What do we do when these types of products are too expensive to produce? And we do have that in a way with a number of medicines, whereby if they were put out in the open market and the market set the price, they might be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. And we can't really have that, because it's people aren't going to buy it. The social impact of production will actually benefit society. So what does the government do in order to help positive externalities? They will offer the government subsidies. And in the way here with medicines, they will have this pharmaceutical benefits scheme, whereby, okay, so it may cost the normal person $400 to buy this particular pill, whatever it is, but under the pharmaceutical benefits scheme, they'll bring it down, and it may be a normal $30 or $20 or something like that. The government will offer subsidies, and they will cover a percentage of the cost. Righto, so going back to our previous example of coal and solar power, we looked at the solar power, the coal power had a tax put on it. Well, you know what? Maybe they're looking at solar power, it's just not productive enough, it's not cost efficient enough, or maybe it's too expensive to produce. So the government may offer solar power companies subsidies, and they did this recently with homes, by telling people that if you introduce solar power, we will cover a certain amount of the cost. It was a solar power rebate scheme. Okay, again, something you should know, because we do study sustainability and environmental impacts later on when we get into Unit 4 work, and they do look at budget things over the last couple of years, and that'll be one. So going back to our middle point again, this is our standard point. Well, now the government is willing to offer a subsidy. So if you're a business that's making solar power and the government comes in and says, you know what, we will cover a certain amount of your costs, what are you likely to do? You're probably likely to increase production now, because your actual cost to yourself are probably going to stay the same, because the government is going to cover those extra ones. So now we have a new supply graph moving to the right, and this is the supply plus subsidy. Again, it could be supply and S1, but S supply plus the subsidy part. So now what has happened? Well, the quantity that you're willing to produce here has increased, hasn't it? Okay, the government is now footing a fair amount of our costs. We're willing to produce more. On that basis, because we're willing to produce more, the price will drop. Okay, again, speaking basic, quantity go up, price go down, vice versa. Excuse me, I've got a cold, so that's why I'm sounding a bit funny. Well, funnier than usual. Okay, so we all understand that? Beautiful. And again, as this in the previous one was the amount of the tax, this is now the amount of the subsidy. Okay, cost decreasing, shift the supply curve to the right. We are willing, our costs have gone down, we are willing to put more as producers into the market. Okay, and because we put a lot more in there, well, we know that the price will come down if there's more in the market. If there's more in the market, it dilutes our price. Okay, lovely. The government compensation to consumers, well, the government expected prices to rise. It was one of the few things that they didn't lie about. They actually said, yes, prices will rise. So what did they do? They offered certain compensation packages. They increased payments to welfare and family benefit. They also cut income tax rates. They cut the tax-free threshold, they raised the level to $18,200. So previously it was $6,000. You didn't pay tax on your first $6,000. You now don't pay tax on the first $18,200. Okay, so consumers now have a choice, don't they? They can go coal or solar. If they want to keep paying the high price, they'll stay with coal. If they want to maybe start looking somewhere else and looking for something a bit cheaper, they might start looking at solar. Or we could even look at wind power. If more people start choosing solar, well, power companies may have to consider reallocating resources to alternative power sources. And here we're coming back to the whole essence of outcome one, and that is resource allocation. That's what we've been looking at. Market system and resource allocation. Okay, so the government may consider offering subsidies to companies who focus on finding alternative power sources. So they get out. Personally, I believe that's what they should be doing anyway. They should be saying, instead of taxing people, if you find a new power source or an alternative power source or promote that, we will help you. We will offer greater subsidies and rewards. I think to offer rewards is a better motivational tool than taxing people. Okay, so eventually both producers and consumers will have reacted to the change in relative prices that the tax has brought about. Back to our old friend, relative prices. Consumers, through the decisions that they're making about how they spend their tax cuts and other benefits, so they want to keep spending it on coal and keep complaining about the price going up, well, they certainly can. But if they want to start changing, looking for alternative, cheaper sources, they'll start looking for solar, wind, things like that. Okay? And producers, well, they're allocating resources to reflect consumer wishes. So all in this whole thing here, we are looking at the concepts of resource allocation decisions being changed and relative prices. And this is what we're saying. Producers or consumers are going to make decisions on their resource allocation decision, which is money, their cash, on the relative prices. The fact that coal has gone up relative to solar power. Producers, well, what's their relative price decision and allocation resources decisions? Well, because consumers are now spending or looking more at buying solar power or wind power or alternative sources, they may now look at changing their resources into those areas, and that's brought about because of relative prices. So just a whole lesson recap: our four types of market failure: public goods, asymmetric information, market power and externalities, and don't forget it's negative and positive externalities, government solutions, regulations, taxes and subsidies. Okay, that's outcome one. I think you've got your sack next. Okay, good luck.